Good afternoon, everybody. So, we move on with the second part of tissue renewal, that is, repair and regeneration of the tissues. In other words, whenever a tissue is injured, how does it recover? How does it come back to its normal shape and size? That is the topic of today. Okay, so first we had the discussion on the renewal of the skin, that is, whenever the skin was injured, how it recovered. And now today we will be discussing something about the complications. What are the factors which are essential for healing of the wound? And then we will discuss an important topic, that is fracture, healing of a fracture of bone. So bone healing is again a different thing, which is a little different because bone, the tissue is totally different from the normal skin and soft tissue. So that needs a little bit of you have to see how the things are there in the bone fracture in repair. Okay. It has got stuck. Just hold on. So we will be discussing these our topic under the following headings today. Coming to the first topic, that is factors influencing wound healing. You see, whenever there is an injury, we have seen by our experience that some of the wounds they heal faster, whereas some of the wounds they take longer time to heal up. So what are the different factors which actually influence the wound healing? So we know there may be different factors, but we have categorized them into two basic categories. One is the local factors and second are the general factors. So what are the local factors? Local factors are actually the type, size and location of the injury. Okay, so if the injury is a very deep seated large wound and located also within the deeper areas of soft tissue, so that will take longer time to heal. It's quite evident, isn't it? And second point is infection. If any infection is there in the wound, it will definitely delay the process of healing. So before the infection is cleared by the means of antibiotics, the infection or the wound will not heal completely. Second is the blood supply. If there is a major damage to the blood supply of or the organ which has got poor blood supply, that will take longer time for healing. There are conditions where some foreign bodies may be inside the wound. For example, some talc, some sand particles in a case of road traffic accident, some suture material like silk suture. So these, if they are left in the wound, they will definitely delay the process of healing. Okay, movement. Now movement, this particular point is more pertinent with bone healing, but in other cases, in case of skin also, uh, this point may come if it is involved in the skin of the joints. Okay, so if the skin of the joint is involved, like skin over the joint, suppose skin over the knee joint, skin over the elbow joint, so if the movement is there, so that healing will be delayed. Okay, then comes radiation. So there are two types of radiations. One is the ionizing radiations that delays wound healing, and second is the ultraviolet radiation that in fact facilitates wound healing. So be careful. Now coming to the systemic factors. Systemic factors, the first one is the age. You see, young people, they have better immunity, the better blood circulation, so those people will have definitely faster wound healing compared to the aged and debilitated people, especially the bedridden people. So they will have a delayed type of wound healing, the old people. Okay. Nutrition is very vital, especially the deficiency of proteins, vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc. They are they can lead to delaying of the healing process. Infection, again, that was a local infection, and now it is systemic infection. Suppose a person is having tuberculosis, suppose the person is having a generalized septicemia, so in those conditions the healing will definitely be delayed. Okay, now steroids are actually delay the process of wound healing. Okay, so if you give lot of steroids, a person who is taking steroids for any other disease, suppose some collagen vascular disease or any other ailment, so steroids do have a property of delaying the wound healing, because they firstly they inhibit the inflammation, and inflammation is very essential for a wound healing, because inflammation will attract chemokines. Once the inflammatory cells have reached there, they will release cytokines, chemokines, which will attract more inflammatory cells, and in turn they will release certain factors which are responsible for the laying down of the granulation tissue, which is very essential for the process of wound healing that we discussed. Macrophages are one of the most important cells which are responsible primarily for the process of the formation of granulation tissue. Granulation tissue, if you remember, we discussed that it comprises of the blood vessels, the budding blood vessels, and the fibroblasts. Okay, that is the base on which the tissue repair takes place. Okay, next comes uh, diseases like generalized disease like diabetes mellitus. So uncontrolled diabetes mellitus that leads to infection, that leads to loss of immunity, and that will lead to delay in the process of wound healing. Hematologic abnormalities, like these are rare abnormalities like defect in neutrophil functions, and in certain conditions where there is neutropenia and bleeding disorders, like a person is having some factor deficiency. Okay, so we have this various factor deficiencies. So factor 8 deficiency, factor 9 deficiency, a person who is having those deficiencies like hemophilia and all, so those people will have delaying of the wound healing. Okay, because you see, first thing in the process of healing is the formation of blood clot. You remember, formation of blood clot is the first thing. Wherever an injury has happened, there will be leakage of blood from the damaged capillaries, and that will lead to formation of a blood clot. So clot, if it is not there or not formed at all, so that will not begin the process of wound healing. Okay, so remember all these points. Coming to the complications of wound healing. So you see why I am discussing this before, because complications can be dealt at the last also, but since it depends mostly on the skin wound, so we are discussing this, but we will discuss again complications of fracture healing separately. Okay, so you have to, if there is a question like complications of wound healing, then you divide the answer into two parts. First is the complications related to skin healing, skin wound, and complications related to the fracture of bone. So first, coming to the complications of skin wound. Okay, number one is the infection. If there is any infection, that will lead to further infection, which will lead to delaying of the healing process. And complication, why it is a complication, like any open wound leads to infection. Okay, so wound, if it remains covered, or if it remains if you from the very beginning you clean up the wound, or if it is a wide wound, gaping wound, you suture it up, so that leads to minimal chance of infection. And if at all there is a chance of infection in case of road traffic accident or anything, we definitely go for some broad spectrum antibiotics. Okay, so one of the important complications of big wound is infection. So we have to limit the infection. Okay. Number two, implantation or epidermal cyst. That is due to the presence of epithelial cells in the bone, which lead to a formation of a cyst known as epidermal cyst. Okay, so that cyst becomes swelling by itself, and that is one of the complications of a wound. Okay, pigmentation. So the area may be pigmented. Thus, wound may look a little dark than the surrounding skin. Deficient scar. So deficient scar is due to inadequate formation of the granulation tissue. So you see, there was this skin like this. It became like this after some wound. So now, if the skin margins are not opposed or the granulation tissue is not formed properly, there will be deficient scar. That is, the scar tissue will not be formed properly, and the wound will remain in a very primary stage. That once the strength of the scar or the strength of the healed tissue, where it will never regain that proper strength. So okay, so that is known as deficient scar. That is, it is still in the immature form. Fine. Then comes something known as hypertrophied scars and keloids. So what are these? So they are excessive scar formation, and they give an ugly look, ugly and pain, and it becomes painful also. And keloids are, so hyper. There are some histologic differences between the hypertrophied scar and keloid. So hypertrophied scars are usually confined to the borders of the initial wound, while keloids have a tumor-like projection. They have a claw-like appearance. So they have a tumor-like projection of the connective tissue. So this is a appearance of a keloid. Okay, you see, it is progressing. It has got a like a claw-like area. From this surface, you cannot make it out because it is just taken tangentially. So this is the surface of the skin, and all you see is there is lack of the skin adnexal elements, that is the glands, the sebaceous glands, the hair follicles, etc., and everything is covered by this fibrocollagenous tissue. This is the fibrocollagenous tissue. You cannot see the dermal adnexal elements. Okay, so those are missing, and this is all covered by fibrocollagenous tissue. So there are minor differences between the hypertrophic scar and the keloid. So that will be dealt separately. But here, keloid and hypertrophic scar both are complications of a wound. Okay. Now what I was telling you just before this, that it can become pigmented. You see, this was the scar, the sutures were given, and you see the pigmentation has taken place, and it looks a little bit odd, isn't it? So the suture marks are there, and they have become a little darker than the normal surrounding skin. So that is one of the complications. Hypertrophied scars and keloids. Then we have something known as contractures. Okay, so these are the skin contracture, means the skin becomes so that there is so much extensive, due to extensive fibrosis, the skin becomes very tight. Okay, and the joints become flexed, and the joints cannot be extended. So that is one of the very important complications related to burn injury. So whenever there is a burn injury, the chances of contracture, this is an example. This picture shows this contracture. So the skin has been contracted, it has been firmly adherent, and the joint has become flexed. There is joint here, you see, has become flexed, as you cannot extend it. So the contracture, if it has to be extended, there has to be release operation has to be done, and it is a kind of a reconstructive surgery, and then only you can extend the wrist. Okay, then this complication is, so this complication, this is known as weak scar. What is weak scar? There is bursting open of the wound, especially after laparotomy, or there is a incisional hernia. Hernia means projection. Projection means if the skin was there like this, after injury it became like this, after repair though it became closed, but still due to the weakness of the muscle or weakness of the wound itself, the contents of the abdomen, especially the intestine or all, may protrude out from the this gap. So that is called herniation. So at times omentum may come out, at times the intestine whole itself may come out, and it looks ugly, and it is a complication, because if it intestine comes out, then there will be obstruction, because whichever area of the intestine comes out, so the area that area where it has come out becomes constricted, and there will be obstruction of the bowel movement. So it will lead to a obstructive hernia, which is an emergency condition. Okay, so that is called hernia. And we have just discussed the excessive contraction, and very rarely from a wound, especially in the burn case, so we can have development of malignancy as well, especially in the Marjolin ulcer following burns. So this is the example of this herniation. You see, there was a wound, it was repaired, but the repair was not adequate. Especially it happens with older people. Older people whose muscle tone is less, they have weaker, I mean, the wound repair is also weak, it's not that strong. So it leads to herniation, especially persons who have additional conditions like cough, bronchitis, or constipation. So whenever they try to put more pressure, the intra-abdominal pressure becomes more, so there is a chance of herniation. Okay. Now difference, there are two things we have discussed. Healing by we have discussed the healing of the skin wound. So now there are two things in this. One is healing by primary intention, that is also known as primary healing, and the next is healing by secondary intention, also known as secondary healing or secondary union. So what are they? Basically, primary intention healing takes place when the wound is clean, it is small, it's uninfected. Okay. Surgically incised wound, like a person who is undergoing surgery, the surgically incised wound is a clean wound. We always try to clean the area before putting the scalpel. We keep the skin as close to each other as possible, and there is less loss of tissue and cells. Okay, the edges of the wound are approximated by the surgical sutures. That is healing by primary intention. What is healing by secondary intention? When does it happen? When the wound is a large wound, infected wound. The classic example is a injury by road traffic accident. Okay, the wound is not approximated by surgical sutures but is left open, and more intense inflammatory reaction, abundant granulation tissue, extensive collagen deposition takes place, and there is formation of substantial, means there is formation of extensive scar which may contract, and this contraction leads to the contraction abnormality we showed in example of Dupuytren's contraction. Okay. So these are the differences. So in the Viva table, you may be asked, what are the differences of healing by primary union and healing by secondary union? We have discussed all the differences, but I will just read out. First is, one is clean, the second one is unclean. One is uninfected, second is maybe infected. This is, margins are surgically opposed and cleaned. Also opposed margins. Okay, it is better to write opposed in the third point. And it is an irregularly unopposed margin. Opposing means bringing together. Okay, that is called apposition, not oppose. Okay, the words are different. So it is oppose. So surgical margins are opposed by means of suture, and the other one is irregular margins, unopposed margins in case of healing by secondary intention. Sutures are used, sutures are not used. Okay, healing with scanty granulation tissue and small gap, and there may be suture tracks. Okay, and there is exuberant granulation tissue. Exuberant means excess, lot of granulation tissue because the wound is large, isn't it? Wound is large, wound is gaping, so granulation tissue has to be more to fill up the gap. Outcome: neat linear surface. The end of primary union, at the end of primary union, you will see only a neat, linear, thin scar, whereas at the end of secondary union, you will see a contracted, irregular wound. Okay, that is one of the complications of wound healing. And here complications are less. Epidermal inclusion cyst may be formed, whereas in secondary union, lot of complications can happen starting from the contracture, starting from infection and suppuration, and it may even require debridement. Means the whole secondary that area needs to be taken out and again sutured for a proper healing to take place. Okay, am I clear? So these are the differences. You may be asked in your Viva table. You may be even asked in your theory exam as a short note, or there are questions related to differences. So there you may be asked this question. Now coming to healing of bone lesions. So you see, bones are a total different kind of tissue. They are the mesenchymal tissue, and they have a totally different activity, their composition, everything is different from the other soft tissues we have. So the functions of bone we don't have to elaborate, you know very well. What you need to remember is that bone is made up of both organic matrix and inorganic substance. Organic matrix is the osteoid, and inorganic substance is the calcium hydroxyapatite, which gives the strength and hardness to the bone. The organic matrix, they have the proteins, especially the type 1 collagens and some non-collagenous proteins. The cell addition proteins like osteopontin, fibronectin, thrombospondin. There are calcium binding proteins like osteonectin. There are proteins involved in the mineralization of bone like osteocalcin. There are some enzymes, albumin, etc. So these are the proteins and they are the organic matrix. So you see, there are the osteoprogenitor cells and osteoblast, which are near the edge of the bone. This is a bone, woven bone. The bone has not been formed properly. So you see a lot of osteoblastic activity is going on. That is the bone formation. There are two basic things in a bone. Bone is a dynamic tissue. Remember, bone is continuously remodeled. Means the composition of bone is continuously changing. Like most of the tissues, the composition keeps on changing. The intercellular composition keeps on changing depending on the environment, depending on the cellular environment or the microenvironment. Okay, so here also the bone's composition keeps on changing from time to time. So there are cells which are involved in the bone growth, which are known as the osteoblasts, and there is the second category of cells. These are known as the osteoclasts, which are there for the resorption of the bone. The word is resorption, resorption. The resorption means the bone is lysed. Bone is lysed in a way, it is not broken, but the calcium from the bone is released. It is eaten up by this the osteoclasts. They function as the macrophages of the bone. Okay, this is one of the examples of the multinucleated giant cells in a normal normal person. Okay, So we had a discussion on the giant cell, types of giant cells. Some giant cells are seen in tumorous conditions. So one of the examples of physiological or normal giant cell is an osteoclast. We have other physiological giant cell like megakaryocyte, which is a you can see a mother of a platelet. Okay, so what I was just telling you, that there are certain cells. Those cells are responsible for promoting the bone growth, and there are some cells which are responsible for resorption of the bone. Okay, so growth promotion takes place. The most important cell is the osteoprogenitor cell, and they are the pluripotent mesenchymal stem cells. Okay, so if I have to tell, they are actually not pluripotent. I will tell them that the multipotent cells, because they are the mesenchymal. They have already differentiated towards the mesenchyme. Okay, so they are the multipotent stem cells. Please, though it is written pluripotent, I think it should be multipotent stem cells. Okay, they're the adult stem cells. We have the embryonic stem cells, which are the true pluripotent stem cells. Remember, we have all discussed all these things, so I'm not telling you again, but this is the adult type of multipotent stem cells, and they are found near the bony surfaces. They differentiate into the cells known as osteoblasts, which we are just discussing, and the osteoblasts are the cells which are responsible for the growth of the bone. When are they converted? When they are stimulated by certain growth factors and certain transcription factors like RUNX2, CBFA1. Okay, so they synthesize, transport, and arrange proteins of matrix and lay down the process of mineralization of the bone, because bone has to be mineralized. That is the crux, because if the bone remains soft, the function will not be served. So the bone has to be hard to bear the whole weight of the body. Okay, if the bones become brittle, if the bones become soft, the body will collapse. Okay, osteoblast. So what are they? They are the bone forming cells. In one word, they're the bone forming cells, and they have receptors. They bind regulatory hormones like the parathyroid hormone, the vitamin D, cytokines, growth factors, and express factors that regulate the function of osteoclasts as well. So they regulate the function of osteoclasts also. Osteoclasts are what? The multinucleated giant cells that we discussed, which are a group of macrophage type of cells. Okay, macrophage, their function is to eat up. Okay, phagocytose, and in that process they demineralize the bone. They remove calcium from the bone, whereas the osteoblasts, they add calcium to the bone. They promote growth, the growth of the bone. Now they remain attached to the surface, and they become flattened also later on. There are some group of cells known as osteocytes. Actually, osteocytes are, you can say, they are the uh, transformed osteoblast. Why? Because when osteoblasts are surrounded by the new organic matrix, they become smaller, the nucleus becomes even smaller, and they are known as osteocytes. So osteoblasts are converted into osteocytes, and in an adult mature bone, inside the bone you feel if you see some dot structures, so those are the osteocytes. On the surface you will see osteoblasts, and within the bone you will see osteocytes. Okay, and these osteocytes, they communicate with each other via some cytoplasmic processes known as canaliculi. Okay, I think you have some idea, because in histology also you have read up in your before your undergraduate classes, that is in class 11, 12, I think you have had some idea of this bone cells. Okay. And what do? They help to control the calcium and phosphate levels in the microenvironment. Okay. So the calcium and phosphate levels are controlled by not only osteocytes, by osteoblast, osteoclast, everything put together, because whenever body needs more calcium, the osteoclasts, they come into picture, they resorb the bone, they eat up the bone, because calcium is stored in bone. Bone is the one of the most important areas where calcium is stored. Okay, so if the body's serum calcium level falls, the body will mobilize calcium from the bone itself, and the process has to be done by a cell known as osteoclast. If the body's calcium is to be removed, after removal from urine and all, if still body wants to conserve calcium in the bone, that is done by osteoblast. Okay, so clasts we have already told: multinucleated cells, group of macrophages, group of cells, and they they are stimulated by macrophage colony stimulating factor, that is MCSF, also by interleukin 1 and TNF, and they regulate the differentiation of osteoclast and maturation. Okay, coming to fracture healing proper. So till now we were discussing the bone, how does it look like, what are the different cells and composition of bone in a nutshell. Of course, we did not go into the details. The details are there, but I did not go because we are just concerned with the healing of the fracture. So to start with, we began with the basic cells of the bone, composition of the bone. Now we are coming to the healing of the bone proper. So there is a term called callus. Please remember this term, callus. It is not CALLOUS, which means a lousy person, not that. The callus is very important because it is like the base, like the granulation tissue of the skin wound. It is the base on which the fracture healing takes place. It is like, it is similar to, though there is granulation tissue here also, but it is similar to the granulation tissue of the skin healing or the skin wound healing. Okay, so healing of bone takes place by formation of callus, and healing depends in what are the factors on which the healing will depend: whether it is a traumatic fracture, that is in a previously normal bone, a normal bone was there, a trauma is there, so healing will be faster because there has been a trauma, otherwise everything was normal. Whereas if the bone has a disease, like the bone had some osteomalacia, or the bone had some osteoporosis, or the bone had some tumor, there was a metastatic deposit in the bone and the bone got fractured. So that will take longer time to heal. Unless we can remove the primary cause, the healing will not take place. Number two, whether it is a complete or incomplete, like a green stick fracture. So in green stick or an incomplete fracture will heal faster. Okay, so if the bone has just bent like this, it's an incomplete fracture, it will definitely heal up faster as well. So if the bone has got separated, the ends have got separated and it becomes a complete fracture, that will take more time to heal. Quite obvious. It's a simple fracture, that's a closed fracture. The bone has broken, but it is still, the margins of the bone are inside. But if it is a comminuted fracture, that the comminuted fracture, it is not comminuted fracture. So this it is basically the splintering of bone is taking place, or a compound fracture when the bone surface has come out of the skin. Okay, the bone end has come out of the skin, it is jutting out of the skin, that is known as compound fracture. So all these lead to delaying of the wound healing. So here also we have primary union of fracture and secondary union of fracture. So primary union, usually it is a very rare condition, especially in case of a bone fracture. Normally the bone heals by secondary union only. So where the primary union happens? Where the ends of the fracture are approximated by compression clamps. So from the very beginning, if some clamps are put, some steel clamps, like some material is put and they are pressed together to keep the bone ends together. So that is called healing by primary union. Like the skin margins, we were opposing the skin margins with the suture. So this is an example like this. So some clamps are given, so which press the ends of the bone together so that the end can heal up faster. So here there is formation of only medullary callus without periosteal callus formation. So you see the bone has several parts. The periosteum is the outermost part of the bone. Then inside the cavities, in the central area is called the medullary cavity, where you see the blood vessels, the nerves, the canaliculi, all these things are Eversen systems are there. So in the medullary cavity only you will see the formation of the you will see the hemopoietic cells. So there the stroma is there, and basically medullary cavity is for the uh, blood vessels. So blood vessel, nerve supply, all happens to the medullary cavity. Okay, so here the medullary callus formation takes place without periosteal callus formation. So what happens in the end result is that the patient becomes ambulatory early. Ambulatory means the mobile early. Patient can move early, but there is the drawback is that the bone suffers extensive necrosis. Okay, so healing has taken place, but in the long run, you see the healing is actually delayed. So it's a it's a different situation. Like we are thinking that the bone healing has already taken place, but inside of the bone, the healing is actually delayed. Patient can walk because the bones are opposed together, but that walking is in fact counterproductive. Okay, so unlike the healing by primary intention in case of skin, so the healing by primary intention in case of fracture is a bit complicated one and is not as clear cut as the healing of skin. So we will prefer the secondary union healing, which is actually through the basic three stages. There are the first is the procallus formation, second is the osseous callus formation, and third is the remodeling of the callus and eventually remodeling of the fracture site. Procallus formation. So you see, whenever a bone fracture happens, there is hematoma, which is a universal phenomenon in any case of wound. So hematoma or blood clot will form everywhere. In every wound, there will be formation of hematoma because of the rupture of the capillaries, rupture of the blood vessels which are present in the area, and that hematoma acts as the framework for subsequent granulation tissue formation, which we have already discussed in the skin wound. Okay, same. Now what happens? These the clot contains lot of cells, the degranulated platelets, and the inflammatory cells. They start coming in after after the wound has happened. They will be releasing certain cytokines. The cytokines, the like the PDGF, the TGF beta, the FGF, and interleukins, they activate the osteoprogenitor cells. We discussed the first cell, osteoprogenitor cell, which are, you can say, the mother of osteoblasts. So the osteoprogenitor cells, they are activated in the periosteum, medullary cavity, and the surrounding soft tissue as well, and they also will modulate some osteoclastic activity also. So there is the modulation, osteoclastic activity, osteoblastic activity. You will say, sir, why osteoclastic activity? The bone is already broken. No, it is not so simple. So if the bone has broken and we have say kind of done oppose the margins of the bone by after after giving a plaster and all that, so there has to be, once the growth happens, there has to be some modeling also, remodeling also. It is, the bone is a very complicated thing, because if there is even a half-inch gap, there will be no function of that particular bone. Okay, leave alone half-inch, even if it is a very small gap, a few millimeters gap also in the bone margins, the bone will not have a proper function. It's so difficult. So because bone is taking the whole weight of the body, you have to understand that. Suppose if there is a fracture in the shaft of the femur and there is a 3 millimeter gap, can the person stand? So it is something like that. So even if the person stands, there will be a lot of pain. So the bone healing has to be complete, and for that, both osteoblastic, that is the growth, and osteoclastic for the remodeling purpose, because the bone cannot be like this. The margins have to be just like this. I think the margins have to be totally at head on each other. Okay, a little bit of separation of the margins will lead to lot of problem later on, and arthritis and all other things can develop later on. So we, the bone healing has to be very I mean complete healing has to take place. So once the hematoma is formed, once the inflammatory cells have come, one of the most important inflammatory cells are the neutrophils. Then come the macrophages, and along with that, the osteoclast, they clear away the fibrin and the inflammatory exudate which is formed initially, the necrosed bone, the debris, because there will be some necrosis because the tissue has been dead, the blood supply has been lost, so there will be some necrosis. So the necrosed bone will be removed by the macrophages, the osteoclasts. Okay, and osteoclasts, as I told you, they are the same group of cells derived from macrophages. So this is a picture which has been taken from the book Harsh Mohan. So you see the hematoma has taken place, the PMNs or the neutrophils, the first line of defense, the inflammatory cells have come, and they are then replaced by the second line of inflammatory cells, that is the macrophages, the lymphocytes and monocytes. The macrophages help in the formation of this granulation tissue, that is the blood vessels. The new blood vessels are formed and collagen is laid down, and here there is special thing, that is formation of a procallus, because just the granulation tissue, just the formation of granulation tissue is not going to do the complete job. We need a bone, we don't need soft tissue replaced in place of bone. A bone will only give the strength. So the bone has to be replaced by a bone only. You get my point? So the procallus has to form. So once the procallus is formed, that lacks calcium mineral, then the osseous callus will be formed, which is more mineralized, and then finally the remodeling has to take place. Like you see, this is very clearly seen. You see, once the callus is formed, it was looking like an odd shape. It had an odd shape. Once the remodeled bone is there, so it will regain its normal shape, which is important. After the inflammation has happened, then here also you will see granulation tissue formation, that is vascularization is taking place, and proliferation of the mesenchymal cells from the periosteum and the endosteum, they are there. Because it is a soft tissue, so mesenchymal involvement is much more. Okay, then what happens? Soft tissue callus or procallus formation. It is the uncalcified fusiform. Fusiform means a shape which has got a bulge in the center, and tapering at the ends. So that is called fusiform. So uncalcified fusiform soft tissue which joins the end of fractured bone but does not have strength and rigidity for weight bearing. That is important. So procallus is not a bone. So it does not have the strength or rigidity for the weight bearing. So activated osteoprogenitor cells in the inner layer of the periosteum deposit the trabeculae of woven bone, the collagen and the osteoid. In some cases, the mesenchymal cells they differentiate into chondroblasts. So here the mesenchymal cells mean that some they have got the this adult stem cell properties and they are differentiated with a particular stimulus. When they are given the necessary stimulus, they differentiate into chondroblasts. Chondroblasts are the cartilage forming cells. Okay, so we had osteoblasts, the bone forming cells, and we have chondroblasts, which are the cartilage forming cells which lead to the formation of fibrocartilage and hyaline cartilage. You see, after some time, the growth of the bone starts. Actually, the bone formation is starting to happen, and maximal girth is seen at the end of second to third week. So the girth is there. The girth means the radius, the diameter of the bone fracture end is maximum at the end, at the middle of the second and third week. You see, you will say, sir, why here? Why not later? Because the bone again has to come back to its normal shape. We saw, you see, the bone was this hematoma was there, the granulation tissue was formed, the procallus was formed. At this sometime around this time, the girth is maximum. Once the remodeling takes place, the girth is again reduced. Okay, so maximal girth at the end of second or third week, and procallus is arbitrarily divided into external, intermediate, internal procallus. That's just the appearance or morphology of a procallus. Osseous or bony callus formation. So now it was without mineralization. It was a soft tissue. Now the callus will be mineralized. That will be calcium will be added, and which will impart strength and give the nature of the bone. Okay, so the procallus acts as a scaffolding. Scaffolding is the base on which osseous callus composed of the lamellar bone is formed. Okay, so first bone is known as the woven bone. Okay, and the next bone, mature bone, is known as the lamellar bone. So woven bone is cleared away by incoming osteoclast. So osteoclast, they will remove the woven bone. It is not that the woven bone itself will be transformed into lamellar bone. The woven bone is gradually removed and new formed blood vessels and osteoblast they invade, laying down osteoid which is calcified. Okay, so basically the woven bone part of it is cleared. I will tell you, there is total removal does not actually take place. So a bit of woven bone which is not needed is removed by the osteoclast, and a bit of woven bone is mineralized, and this is it's a random process. Okay, it's a dynamic process. It's not a static process like something is formed, something is removed. It does not happen. It's continuously there is laying down and removal, laying down and removal. So ultimately the shape has to come back to its normal shape as much as possible. Okay, that is our aim. That is our aim, because the bone has to look like the femur has to look like a femur. A femur cannot look like a tibia, isn't it? So the ultimate end result should be a same bone which has been fractured. So newly formed blood vessel, that is the granulation tissue, along with the division of the certain osteoblasts which lay down the osteoid, and then finally calcification takes place from inside. That is, the cartilage is laid down by the chondroblast. So that is called enchondral ossification. So ossification means the mineralization of the bone, the calcification of the bone, and the woven bone is by enchondral calcification. Okay, now gradually the whole Haversian system and everything is formed concentrically along the blood vessels. The Haversian system is the connectivity, the canaliculi. They together between the communication between the various cells. That is the canal through the canaliculi that forms the Haversian system. Okay, and they form concentrically around the blood vessels. You have seen the picture of the cross section of the bone, I think, and the bone callus, the bony callus formed is after the mineralization, and that gives the strength to the callus. Okay, so finally, the before the osseous callus, we have a procallus, and later on we have a bony or osseous callus, and the callus is basically the mineralization of the woven bone. Okay, so woven bone, part of it is removed, part of it is there is from some cartilage is laid down by the chondroblast, which have been differentiated from the mesenchymal adult stem cells, and that leads to the calcification begins from the cartilage inside and comes and covers the whole of the bone. This is an example of a fracture of a fibula. This is the tibia, this is the fibula. The fracture site is well visible here, and the callus formation are 6 weeks. Okay, 6 weeks, the bone is still weak. We say that 6 weeks, by 6 weeks the patient becomes ambulatory, but you see by the look of the fracture, the bone, though it has been joined and everything, but still it has not regained its normal shape, still swollen at the middle. Okay, and this is an example of this callus. What we see in callus, the woven bone, the blood vessels, the fibrocollagenous tissue. Okay, and lot of osteoblastic activity and some osteoclastic activity is also seen, so that this callus becomes confused at times with the neoplasm, that is osteosarcoma. At times the resemblance of a callus is so it's so much to the osteosarcoma that the pathologist gets confused whether it is a fracture callus or he or she is seeing a neoplasm, that is a malignant tumor of the bone known as osteosarcoma. Last part of the fracture healing is remodeling. So in the early stage of callus formation, excess fibrous tissue, excess cartilage and bone is produced. After that, the osteoclasts, they come, resorb the bone and ultimately remodel it to the normal shape and size. So the callus has got 3 parts: the external callus, the intermediate callus and the internal callus. Coming to the complications, we just discussed some time back the complications of skin wound healing, and the complications of fracture healing are a little different. So what are the complications? Fibrous union, non-union, delayed union. These terms are used very frequently in the orthopedics department. So what is a fibrous union? If immobilization of the fractured bone is not done, the bone is not immobilized, that the plastering is not done, and a false joint develops between the fractured ends, like it is not a true joint, it behaves as a false joint, and that is known as pseudoarthrosis. Okay, so that is a very dangerous thing, because that leads to weakness of the area that cannot bear the total strength of the body, because there is a gap, there is a fibrous tissue which has not been calcified. Okay, the fibrous tissue is there between the two opposed ends which has not been calcified, and naturally, because the bone is not there, it may bend, so it gives a false appearance of a joint. because it can bend, because there is a soft tissue. So the bone is deficient in the area where there is fibrous tissue. So this is called a false joint or pseudoarthrosis. Next come non-union. The bone margins are quite away from each other. Even the fibrous tissue cannot bridge the gap, and that is called a non-union. So that is the worst thing. Worst thing is that the person will never, that bone which was supposed to do a particular function will never be able to do the function, because the bone ends are quite away from each other and the fracture healing has not taken place at all. So that is called non-union. Okay. Third is called delayed union. Delayed union happens when we have got all the causes of infection here. The localized as well as the generalized causes will be applicable, like infection, inadequate blood supply, poor nutrition, old age, etc. All the diseases, including some bone disease like osteoporosis, osteomalacia, and don't forget malignancy. So if there is a metastatic deposit, there will be, the chances are there may be even a non-union or a delayed union. Okay. So these are the complications of fracture healing. So in short, we have three complications: fibrous union, non-union, and delayed union. So we have come to the end of the chapter, and on time, I think. So we had these topics we had read. Thank you so much. If you have any queries, you can write it up in the group, and I will be happy to answer you.
Thank you, Dr. Palash. Thank you so much. A very, very extensively handled lecture, including factors influencing healing, complication of skin wound healing, healing of bone, which is very important for postgraduates as well as undergraduates, and especially people who are handling bone tumors. They should know steps of bone healing, callus and its appearance. And you rightly pointed out that a very proliferative callus can be very, very difficult at times microscopically to differentiate between osteogenic sarcoma, and one has to understand that very well. Remodeling of bone is so essentially important, and everybody needs to understand. And the last, which you really pointed out very well, was the complications of bone healing, especially non-union. And many a times in histopathologies, we have to handle these non-unions, and they are very, very dangerous. Thank you, Dr. Palash, for this extensive topic, and you handled it very, very well as usual. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you, sir.